Wow. Didn't know if we were getting there or not. Good afternoon. My name is Jodi James, and I am pleased to be here with Hector Roos for our 50th. Wait, I have to do that 5 times for our 50th episode. Thank you. It's almost like the psychedelics when you were a kid. 50th. Oh, wait, you're not supposed to do psychedelics as a kid. Never mind. The 50th episode of Elevated Intel, round 50. Pleased to be here. Thanks for staying tuned. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but if you're watching this later, you didn't know and everything was perfect and just carry on. Believe we're always doing it well. It's worth waiting for. Today's elevated intel is going to be particularly interesting. I've got Hector Roos with me. He's going to talk to us about what's happening in Tallahassee, part of our legislative program. Alex Johnson would love to be with us, but she is on site doing an event today. We had a great opportunity over the weekend. Can you make sure we're live? Steve, give me a heads up if we're live. I'm seeing some stuff in the background over here. Want to make sure we're still good. Okay. Apologize again. Had a great time over the weekend at the Florida Medical Cannabis Conference and Expo in Orlando, Florida. Nearly 200 people came out. There's a particular interest in what's happening in medical marijuana right now in Florida, particularly in light of what's happening at the federal level in decriminalization. So we're going to miss Alex today, but we are going to get into a little bit of what's happening and what we know about the federal descheduling. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in some of our neighbors' program. Again, we have Hector that is going to talk to us about Tallahassee. And then Steve Thaw is going to come in and talk to us a little bit about what's happening with Florida Cannabis Action Network and a little of the history that he is learning about the move. I'm going to go ahead and start right now. Welcome, Hector.
Hey, Jodi, thanks for having me. Been a minute.
Well, we all missed last week because we were busy doing busy things and FMCCE. So, but it's been a long time for you because you've been busy doing Hector things.
Yeah, but glad to be back. That's the point.
There you go. Well, I'm excited to talk about what's happening with our neighbors, but we probably should start with what's happening in Tallahassee. You just got back, and I still have questions.
Sure. Well, I got back early morning this week, back from special session F. This is the 6th special legislative session. That means that between the 2025 legislative session and the one that we had this year, starting in what was it, March? No, earlier, started in January.
Anyway,
we've had 6 special sessions on top of that, including one that actually adopted a budget, right? That didn't get passed during the 60-day session. And this one was the, let's call it the grand poobah, last hurrah of Governor DeSantis, who's term limited and can't run for office again or reelection. He proposed the legislature to put it on the ballot a new and controversial, get a minute of that, homestead property tax exemption. This has been on the ballot maybe 8 times in 40 years or so, and it's only passed on the ballot 3 times. So and all that, and it's about not passed three other times at least.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the news there. It did pass with some amendments. They're not going to touch school board money. And the controversy really was about, hey, there is 2 things that this proposal is going to do. It's going to ultimately create the largest homestead property tax exemption in Florida history at $250,000 per home, in addition to the one that already exists that is $50,000. So $300,000 in total. Oh, and wow. Now you have local governments scratching their head like, how much money are we going to lose? The governor called the special session pretty much at the end of the budget, the special session for the budget, which was last week, that gavelled out on Friday. And so who's going to actually hear about it? And then who's going to actually make the time to show up? I did.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
So somebody showed up, and a couple of people there. I saw Melissa Villar, for example, speaking in public comment about, well, she's local to Tallahassee.
Right.
But and the question was like, how many people who will actually be affected and really receive the relief that this is intended will actually get to speak, rather than all the other people representing either some government agency, local government, that are saying we're uncertain about what this is going to cost to our budgets, and if we're going to have cuts in services and whatnot. And honestly, I was probably the only one there to actually say, well, what about the uncertainty of the taxpayer who wants to know if they can even afford the ever increasing taxes, and whether they can remain to stay in their home as a result. That's what about their uncertainty? And I heard a few legislatures actually mirroring that language in the debate the next day. So I was like, yay, that's somebody's listening. It actually ended up being far more popular amongst legislators than I thought it would be, given the pressure that was put on them from local government, from public sector unions, and the typical. And it made me, at the end of the day, made me go, this is working, and this might be even something that yeah, it seems like a big deal, but this is really, at the end of the day, not a policy that the legislature is adopting. They're giving it to the voters instead, to, in their wisdom, decide how much services they really want, and is paying all this extra taxes something that they it's in their interest. Let them decide that. So that was the interesting part of it. And then it does dovetail back and makes me think, in the cannabis space, well, does that mean when they're thinking about revenue, are they going to be interested in doing something like what Virginia did, and whole cloth adopt a recreational market that then they get to tax up the wazoo? So that's the short of it.
I could spend an entire hour on just those two little bits. I was thinking, on my street, so many of the houses on my street over the years have become rental properties, that of the 14 houses on my street, there's probably only 7 of us that are homesteading. I live in the same house that I could afford to live in 22 years ago, so my mortgage is low. I would probably pay no property taxes at all, which saves me a couple $100 a month, which would allow me to pay off my house a lot sooner. I would be hard pressed to vote no, and I don't think that I think that there's probably a lot of people who think, well, heck, I'll be paying taxes on my $125,000, but the guy on the beach will be paying taxes on his $700,000. I'm up for that. Because his $1 million home, he's still going to be paying taxes, and yet so very interesting. I once wrote a legalization plan as part of a 5-point plan, because you got to have a 5-point plan if you're going to work with government. It had the majority of taxes being collected locally. So as opposed to, and Colorado, my husband just came back from Colorado. When Colorado set up their legalization scheme, they set it up very top. Yeah, same thing, only different. They set it up really top heavy. So Denver was having a hard time finding the revenue to implement the program that had been passed. So it was really challenging for the city of Denver, and Denver ended up putting additional taxes on their marijuana. So, maybe that is a way for us to sell cannabis as we move forward. All right. Very interesting. I'm seeing stuff from Steve in the chat. Hello, Carla. Good to see you. Carla was at the FMCCE, and one of the things I put in, Hector, you'll appreciate this, is show up for these FLCAN things or prepare for the FOMO. We had an amazing time at the FMCCE, and I think next week we'll be hearing from Alex Johnson of Jacksonville, where she tells us a little bit about what's happening in science. But I wanted to talk a little bit. There's a couple tidbits that people around us should know. First of all, Georgia has significantly changed their cannabis laws. Georgia will now have flower available for vaping. And so there was a lot of interest in what lawmakers might think flower for vaping might look like, but it appears they are going to be selling whole flower plants. Unlike Florida that had all of its whole flower available for vaping in little pods that only worked in certain machines. That was kind of the beginning of the uncaging of flower for Florida. These will be allowed to be able to be sold, I think, in 1,200 milligram implements. So very interesting. In Georgia, you won't get an eighth or a half or something, you'll get 1,200 milligrams. So if it's going to be 18%, you'll get a little more flour. If it's 22%, you'll get a little less flour. So that's a little different. Haven't seen that anywhere before. For those of you who are on the border, Florida and Alabama, and wondering whether or not you should be in Florida, I will tell you Alabama has opened its first cannabis store. Now they are selling chewables, they are selling lozenges, and as long as you like jazzy peach, you are in, because the state, in its infinite wisdom, determined that only peach is the flavor of that is Alabama. I'm not confused. It is Alabama who has decided that the only flavor available is peach. So I thought that was interesting. But the big news for me this week, and I don't know if anybody else is watching, is Louisiana has recriminalized cannabis. Actually, what they have done is created a new felony. So if you are within a certain feet of a school and you have a cannabis product, either in possession of or smoking cannabis, it is now a felony. The Louisiana governor said he was very excited about this. He's tired of driving around Louisiana and smelling marijuana near college campuses. He thinks college campuses should be family friendly. I'm not sure what that does to the 18-year-olds in Louisiana who just might happen to be smoking cannabis in or around or near their campus, but we're going to have a new crop of young people with cannabis felonies. Welcome to legalization.
That's sad. And then meanwhile, what happens if they have participate in a federal program now?
Felony, baby, felony. Yeah, because really, we've been fighting the war on drugs for 50 years so that we could make more teenagers into felons.
Well,
Made me sad, Hector.
it's not going to be missed that when people start getting arrested and asking why is there a government interest to criminalize behavior that's recognized as legal and medicinally important at a federal level, international level even, people are going to be asking those tough questions, and that's where that's where the politics meets the road, literally.
100%. I did want to touch base real quick on what's happening on rescheduling. Florida Cannabis Action Network has applied to be part of the conversation in rescheduling that is scheduled to happen June, that J month, June 29th. We are expecting to be told by June 22nd whether or not we have been accepted. I started doing a little bit of dive into this, and I'm getting a little bit concerned. I've came across the story from Dale's blog or something like that said that there were some challenges to the federal rescheduling that might actually have legs. And it kind of took me down the rabbit hole. One of the things that we have reported on is that most recently, May, the acting attorney general signed a memorandum rescheduling cannabis to Schedule 3. telling the DEA that they needed to conduct hearings. There was an understanding at the time that those hearings were going to be whether or not to decide to legalize marijuana, how we were going to regulate marijuana, what that was going to look like. They sent out a call for responses. That's parcel of what we are doing with our request to be heard on it. But several other people have put out requests to be heard on it. And when we went to Schedule 3 under the federal treaty, which is where we're at now, he used International Single Convention Treaty information. You can see some information on that with our board member Mike Crowitz, who's talked on this. One of the things that has to happen according to international treaty is that all the marijuana that is sold has to be tracked. And not only does it have to be tracked, it has to be sold to the DEA at a nominal price and then bought back from the DEA before you can actually sell it. Now that takes place on paper and it really ends up being kind of a fee, pay to play. And one of the things that is required in the memorandum from May, was it April 18th? Maybe it was April 18th, from the memorandum from the Attorney General, is that they had all of these companies that currently are operating under state law had to register with the DEA. And one of the questions that they're asking is, have you been producing or selling marijuana illegally? And there is one company, MMJ International, that is challenging not the rescheduling, but the idea of allowing any of the companies that have been operating illegally to get this DEA license. So that is an active court challenge. They have named Todd Blanche as one of the plaintiffs in that. And they believe that they are being wronged. They are not selling marijuana at this point. But that they have registered with the DEA. They do have a Schedule 1 drug license and they have been in drug development. And they believe that they are the only ones, or at least the only people who should be able to qualify for this new DEA permission slip is MMJ International. We've also seen several lawsuits challenging the rescheduling, so we'll see how that plays out. 13 states have joined with Smart Approaches to Marijuana to challenge the DEA rescheduling. So it's going to be an ongoing topic for us for quite some time.
That's right. And I want to point out, it's important to compare this to the last attempt for rescheduling, which happened now almost 3 years ago. And the question back then,
right?
Yeah, the question back then was who's going to be, what are the witnesses that we're actually going to have be made available for the lawsuit on that, because the process was not including patients, was not including veterans, was not including, it was all the commercial enterprises that were and some academics that were being approved to be expert witnesses. So people who were end users were totally cut out. So it's important that FLCAN and others be able to voice the opinion of what is actually working for consumers and patients. And that's really important because ultimately it informs as to the plan itself, right? And informs as to, well, how much of this is commercial behavior versus how much is it just a fundamental right to have access to medicine. In the same way that we argue about, that taking vitamin supplements is something that you can overdose on vitamin supplements, by the way. Right. But the issue is like there's a question of whether we should be treating the plant similarly for the point of home grow, or it's just for the point of access to the plant itself in a manner that's not regulated by the international treaty, which is just domestic, right? Domestic use. So in other words, an international agreement exists out there for decades to control the foreign and international trade of it, and domestically you've been allowed to, the governments have been allowed to regulate it, but fundamentally, it's historically speaking, this is a plant, right? This is regardless of whether you grew in the ground,
uses,
a garden, or nursery. I mean, this is it's called, it's dubbed weed because it can grow anywhere, frankly.
Right on.
So how much restriction are you going to put? What is it going to take to restrict it? Is this going to be, are the feds going to supersede all domestic policies in the states in regards to this? Because honestly, look at, they sell aspirin over the counter, right? But take too much of that, right? And you can cause a organ bleed, really, right? And I'm serious. This
No,
is like,
100%.
yeah, I
No,
mean,
100%.
right. Or and of course I say that, but the big question in the room was, is it going to be as accessible as alcohol, right? In terms of access, not the restriction, but so it's it's a fascinating, where are we going with this next? And Florida Can's right there in the in the front seat.
Well, I'm pretty excited about it. I just learned that we're not going to have Steve talking about the history of Dennis Perone this week, but we'll get to that next week. I did want to continue a little bit more on this rescheduling. One of the things, or I'm sorry, the
You mean the DEA application for the rescheduling part?
no, I won't. There was a manufacturer's lawsuit. Are you familiar with the manufacturer's lawsuit?
I am somewhat, there's it's now that more people have been exposed or have access to CBDs or to hemp CBD products. There's now a class action lawsuit filed by a personal injury firm, trying to say that it has harmful side effects. And ultimately, these are kind of a dime a dozen in especially in the United States. So to the extent that
Okay.
these usually end in some kind of settlement, but it is interesting to see these come out, where people, and mind you, this is a bigger conversation. Is past conversation we had with Mike Crowitz, for instance, that there is some documented uh, uh, medical problems or that are included now in directories for what are side effects in regards to some of these products that and we know, when you adulterate the plant itself, in fact, any process to the plant
Any product.
can have some certain side effects, but the more intense the chemical process, the more unknowns there are in terms of side effects. We've heard it, we've kind of heard it all, but is it the plant or is it the byproducts of the process that we're talking about?
Right.
So getting it down to, again, another reason why people should have access to the raw plant whenever possible, or flower, and the different applications that you can use for the whole plant, the better. And this is just another indicator of why it's important to do that, because it's not, it's only in terms of in last decade that people have more complaints about side effects, and it goes hand in hand with how the industry is developed.
Right. When we were rolling hash, because we would walk into the fields and there'd be so much resin on our pants that you could just roll it off of your pants onto, sticky bud. That was pretty raw. When you were taking your plants and you were getting it and shaking it with ice and melting the ice that was sticking to the terpenes, that was pretty raw. So yeah, I'm a whole plant girl, and I know most of the people that we work with Florida Cannabis Action Network are whole plant people. Uh, Definitely want access to the euphoric portion of cannabis, but not just that, the medical benefits and the whole thing. But I'm a firm believer that cannabis is still more magic than science, and I want the magic, baby. I want the magic. But I think this is interesting that now they're saying and they're using this. I did see that they were jumping from this claims of benefit to add into the discussion on Schedule 3 how, and that's part of what the lawsuit from the attorney generals or the letter from the state attorney generals is about, is how can you call this a medicine when it hasn't been through all these processes and we don't have this efficacy. And I saw something that you were treating it to like vitamin C, and vitamin C really does have an amazing history. the guy who developed the extracted vitamin C started making health benefits about it. And there were many conferences where he was like denied being able to talk about it. He had his travel interfered with so that he couldn't get to conferences and talk about it. So, that if you're mimicking that one, we sure have a long
Well,
ways to go.
if you want the government to decide what the scientific conclusions are, yeah, then that you litigate it, right? But then that's what you're actually asking judges to do, is to weigh in on the science. But it's the same. This is the same process that has created this idea that somehow taking calcium is going to be good for your teeth. But you know that your teeth aren't actually made up of calcium, and neither are your bones, right? They're teeth and bones. But so, but that's the science that's
Sure.
been
Then why am I putting eggs in things to get at calcium in my dog food? I'm
right,
so confused.
right.
Which is kind of
Yeah.
the way I walk around when it comes to, the food pyramid and all of that stuff. I just keep thinking, green and plant good. That's what people keep telling me. I was saying to somebody, the Florida medical marijuana program has done a real disservice to patients in general because at the very beginning they designated everything had to be oil. And so there was a whole rush to the bottom. Who knows how many tens of thousands of lead-ridden uh, batteries and vape cartridges were originally dispensed before anybody recognized it. It's been something. But I think the way that, at least in my mind, that we make changes and that we move this forward has always been Florida Cannabis Action Network's legislative program. We adopted it in 2011. When you asked me the other day, what are our strategies? I'm like, well, aren't we doing the same thing we did last year? Skimpy, we were going to try and take over the marijuana space. It's very simple. Uh, we're doing a couple things right now, candidate surveys and looking at open seats. Is there anything there that you think people should be reminded about?
Well, I think for our listeners, the more important part is that we do have a candidate survey up on our website, and that if you are supporting a candidate for office, whether federal or state, have them fill out the survey. It's a straightforward 5-question survey, just to get a clear idea of where someone, what are the touch button issues this year that we want people to tell us where they stand on, including where they stand on President Trump's effort to bring CBD into the Medicaid market for those patients. So it's a question about, well, we don't want this to be a hyper partisan issue, but there's a lot of different things, a lot of moving parts to this, whether it's stay at the federal level, and certainly people deserve to know. First of all, they deserve to know where they stand on these issues, but more importantly, they also deserve to know that overall the people they're supporting know about these issues in the first place, right? So you can answer to those questions, then you are that much more educated on the important issues of the day.
And by taking our survey, then we can help to amplify the voice of your candidate.
That's
That's
right.
the other important thing.
We're
I,
still on track. We're still on track to reaching out to as many of the 1.7 million petition signers that signed to put the recreational question on the ballot in November. Obviously, did not make it there, but we know who they are, where they are, and if you break that down, that's roughly 10,000 signers, like per state senate district. Like, I mean, this is not a small number, right?
right.
Not a small. This more than affects. It can affect the outcome of elections in Florida, in any legislative district, whether federal or state.
We have a plan to do it. We have the people in place to do it. I want to do a shout out to our friends at Suncoast Normal. They have candidates on every Sunday in the rotation. So candidates are jumping into the rotation. So make sure that your candidate that you support does the Florida Can survey. That's for federal House, federal offices, Florida House, Florida Senate, and statewide governor, how agriculture, right?
All the cabinet,
CFO,
yeah, the cabinet level
AG.
positions. That's right.
We
Uh,
get to talk about the AG before it's over. I'm just saying.
yeah, I hear you, and I'm telling you, it's not. There is things that we can do. We were talking about it this the other day, Jody, and I'd love to end this segment on this note. Is that we are working with members of Congress. We are working with legislators, and even in regards to the rescheduling hearings, there's we're going to end up like helping them draft a letter to circulate among other members of Congress to try and influence the process in the right direction.
Absolutely. And several of our, because we have been working in Tallahassee for so long, a number of the people who are in Congress right now know Florida Cannabis Action Network. They've seen us boots on the ground. Before we go too far, though, agencies are changing their policies based upon the current rescheduling. Several weeks ago, we asked you if you were part of a union to go ahead and reach out to your unions. We asked last week that if you were part of if you're in your own community, reach out to school board members and talk to your school board members. My husband just came back from a conference in Denver. Of course, Denver is fully legal. His company set up an office in Denver. And when he first interviewed for the company, we kind of had some consternation in our home because they drug test. And so we're pretty honest people, and there's lots of ways to pass a drug test, and one of them is to abstain. And so my husband abstained, and he legitimately passed his test. He didn't study, he didn't use any study aids, he legitimately passed. But he also told them
He literally passed.
he literally passed 100%. And he was very vocal with them about not wanting to take it, about not feeling like he should take it, about being a patient in a legal state. So he was in Denver, and someone asked their HR about now if they, fail a drug test because of an injury or something like that, what's the policy? And his company said, well, we certainly would just skip the marijuana part if you were a legitimate patient, because now it's Schedule 3. So I say that because while we're working with the federal government as a leadership team with Florida Cannabis Action Network, we're all about cannabis. We're all about action, as well as that network. And the action is on you right now, because each and every one of you could have been the person who asked HR to clarify the policy. You don't have to admit to being a cannabis user, or you can, that's on you. Now you know, in order to get one of those, you got to join.
Yeah, that's true. But
So
it is the network, right? It
it
is
is
the
the
network.
network. That's how you know you're in, is because you're in the network. And you know what? I think the last dozen lapel pens from this run are on their way to Jacksonville. We have had a bundle of new members coming in from the Jacksonville area. Very proud of Jacksonville. Jacksonville is doing fun stuff every month. Twice a month, you can participate in High Society. You can find that on Eventbrite. So go ahead and sign up through Eventbrite and go to High Society.
Sometimes
When you
more than
get
once a month.
twice, they're twice a month. They're doing two. They're doing one in Duval and one in Clay. So one within 15, 20 minutes of you every month. And that's a fabulous meetup of great people. They have created their own Florida Can network within the High Society. So you don't have to be a member of Florida Can to attend, but you can attend as a Florida Can member, and that's good too. Also doing the Mary Walkers in Jacksonville once a month. So get your dog walker and take a stroll with some other folks that are interested in cannabis and wellness, and use as an opportunity once a month to do something good for yourself.
And let's not forget, then this weekend we have an upcoming event over at Weekend at Benny's.
Weekend at Benny's. And I'm expecting all of us to be able to leave on our own power. That's my story. That's going to be in Zephyr Hills. We may have already booked up for this event. Benny is our newest board member. Congratulations to Benny Blanchard. If you've seen your newsletter this month, you'll see that Benny Blanchard, we're happy to welcome Benny Blanchard. He was elected to the FLCAN Board of Directors in May. Still need to get a press release out on that up on our website, but we'll make that happen. The important part is that we're thrilled to have Benny. And Benny, even before he was nominated as a board member, had agreed to open up his home in Zephyr Hills. So we've got some private property. Be sure to register. There is a Google form available. I think it's hit social media a few times. But if the registration is still open, then there is still space for you. Bring your own chair. And it is a potluck. So bring some snacks to share. I am making a 7-layer dip. It is BYOB and BYOC. Booze, beverages, bud, chairs, cannabis,
So in other words,
BYOB,
it's a real potluck.
It is a real potluck. No, really. It was sharing is caring kind of opportunity.
Absolutely.
But we have some of our new members coming, and Florida Cannabis Action Network is really super exciting. There's always fun stuff going on. The biggest problem new members have is figuring out when they're not going to engage, not finding ways to engage. So last but certainly not least, we want to talk about an upcoming event in Fort Lauderdale. Do you have the location in front of you, Hector?
I was just pulling that up. That's funny. Yeah, it's let's see if it says where it's at in my notes. And darn it if it doesn't say where it is. But it's definitely in Fort Lauderdale. It's usually they have these in like library settings or private studios.
This is African American Cultural Center is what I think the name is. But I was hoping that you had the real name of it. But I think it's the African American Cultural Center. Don't quote me on it, but I do know that there's going to be 2 days of pretty intensive training.
That's right.
That much I'm sure of.
Friday, July 17th and Saturday, July 18th at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, 2650 Sistruck Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale. This is the historic Black neighborhood of Sistrunk. It's a crash course in leadership training that they're bringing to Florida that they've been holding in other states. And what they're calling the crash course is a free public facing day of education on federal cannabis policy, anti-monopoly protections, and tools for advocacy. The leadership is an intensive application-based program for a select group of emerging and experienced leaders ready to sharpen their organizing skills and strategies.
So for the 17th, July 17th, that's a Friday. You'll need to apply for that. That is their leadership. And you can find the application through Florida Cannabis Action Network. We'll make sure we get that out in the coming week. And then on July 18th, that is open to the public. And everybody is welcome to attend. There is no cost for this event, but certainly lots of value. And I, for one, will be there. I think you're going to be there part of the time. I am expecting Carla Ashburn, from our Florida Can Board of Directors, to be attending. Shout out to Carla. And we'll just see how many other Florida Canites can get down there. But we've already talked to a few people who have been to previous trainings, and they've found a lot of value to it. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. All right. So far, so good. I think we covered it. Louisiana, recrim bad. Alabama, peach, are you kidding? Georgia, loose the flower. DEA, maybe yes, maybe no, remains to be seen. 2 million, is that what you told me? 2 million for special session?
Oh, the cost is about somewhere between 2 million for every special session that gets that they hold. That's the administrative cost of holding it.
So we're going to remind everybody that we just completed special session F. So if you are a fiscal conservative and you think I have to vote Republican because I'm a fiscal conservative, look very carefully at the primary and make sure you vote in the primary, because not every fiscal conservative is created equal. Next week, you're going to have a little bit of history with our friend
And
Steve
science.
Thaw, and a little bit of science with Alex Johnson. So for
Lady
now,
Alex Johnson.
Lady Al, we love our Lady Alex. Hector, anything else before we wrap up?
The euphoria, you mentioned it, but really, part of the conversation that was ongoing is whether or not you have the right to experience access to a euphoric experience. And I don't mean that in the sense of just having fun, but also in the side of actually treating mental illness, right? Because it's a catch-all. There's an interest in continuing to restrict the effects, which is why THC is actually still under attack, and despite
Right.
despite CBD being found as CBD being decontrolled internationally, and the international
100%.
community also declaring that in order for CBD products to be effective, they still need a little bit of that THC in it. So,
And they
and
know it.
that's their science.
Right.
That's very well established, and that's where we're coming at. But a zero THC restriction is we're still trying to, that's still on the front lines of where we're at here, and that's why we need your
Well,
help. We need to be involved.
couple ways you can do that: like and share. Join Florida Cannabis Action Network as little as $5 a month or $50 a year. We love and you will get penned. We are working really hard to make sure that we're where you're at, so that we can create that local action that's going to be important. Mark your calendars. We do have July 17 and 18 in Fort Lauderdale. We'll be back in Tallahassee starting in January with committee weeks and running our ambassador program. And it looks like Cannabis at the Capitol is going to be March 8th and 9th. Something I forgot, Hector?
No, just want a quick shout out in the chat to Patty Hukulani, who says, "Thank you for what you guys do. I really appreciate it. And rest in peace, Robert Platshorn."
Black Tuna.
That's right.
Rest in peace, Bobby Tuna. All right. But next, and you know what? That's a great history segment too, the history of Bobby Tuna. But next week, we'll be talking about Dennis Peron, and I might talk a little bit about Joe Hart. And there's your teaser for next week. All right. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget to like and share. Ask somebody in your company what you're doing, what your company is doing now about cannabis, since it is no longer Schedule 1, your medicine is state legal, constitutionally protected, and now federally Schedule 3. Don't be shy.